Chit Chat is sponsored by Fun Again Games, where everyone is welcome at our table, and your source for hard-to-find imports, liquidation games, new releases, and much more. Be sure to visit funagain.com to check it out. On episode 114 of Chit Chat, things are getting heavy, and we're talking about games with weight. Scholars have discussed the topic for ages, but game weight is subjective. What seems heavy now might seem much lighter in the future. Welcome back to Chit Chat. This is episode 114, and we're going to be talking about heavy games tonight. Not just heavy games, we're going to be talking about weight in general in terms of games and kind of what goes into the weight of games. Emily and I had a conversation recently, so we thought, let's take that conversation to Chit Chat. Share it with Ryan and share it with Jeremy. Jeremy's here in the house again. Welcome, Jeremy, from MVM North.
Yeah, I'll be there soon, man. Miss you guys.
Yeah, he is
can't
coming
wait to
down
talk
very
about
soon.
games.
He's going to come down. We're going to record a bunch of stuff here in the next week or so. But right now, we do have a winner from last week before we start talking about the weight of games. And that winner is, I have information on here, by the way, it's not for their eyes, so they don't let them look.
Not peeking
The
at
winner of Alhambra, the big box, is Richard Nathan Daniels. Richard Nathan Daniels, congratulations on winning. We will email you to sort out all the details and get you the big box of Alhambra. And thanks again to Queen Games for offering that up.
Yeah, it was huge.
So, heavy games.
Yeah.
Here's why I wanted to bring this up. Emily and I played Scholars the other night, and we played Wayfarers somewhat recently. Wayfarers of the South Tigris. Scholars of the South Tigris, from Garfield Games, S.J. McDonald and Shem Phillips. And we were talking about the weight of them. And I thought Scholars was a little heavier than Wayfarers.
I thought Wayfarers was heavier than Scholars.
Like a lot?
Not a lot.
Not a lot.
I think they're kind of comparable, but I definitely, when I look at the two, I'm like, Wayfarers does seem heavier to me, for sure.
Yeah, so the consensus is that both of them are on the heavier side of games from Garfield Games. But we started talking about why we consider things heavy. And I will put this out there for all of us to discuss. And Jeremy, you haven't played either, so participate as much as you can.
But Jeremy's played heavy games.
Yes.
He's no stranger.
Yes, this kind of applies to all
None
games.
of us really are strangers
But
to heavy games.
I considered Scholars a little heavier, but I considered its heaviness coming from the crunchiness of the decisions and the things that you're doing within the game. The thinking that's going on in the game, which I think is maybe mostly what people consider when they think about heaviness.
Sure.
Whereas Wayfarers, also a lot to think about, but I think it has a lot, sort of an amalgam of different mechanics and things going on. So it's kind of heavy, but that kind of falls less on the thinkiness and more on the complexity of the game's design standpoint.
I would say like the teach for Wayfarers. Like I just got somebody Wayfarers as a gift, and I was like, I don't want to teach this to you because I've only played it a couple times and I don't feel qualified to teach it quite yet. But Scholars, if you put it in front of me, I'd be like, oh, I could teach this because it made so much sense the way the mechanics flow into each other and the story that's being told with the theme. You're like literally taking these texts and translating them using translators. It makes sense in my brain on what we're doing and why we're doing it. So it kind of sticks more easily and I feel like I could then teach it and therefore then play it more easily than Wayfarers where I'm like, you're kind of doing this and kind of doing that, and then also taking tiles, and they come together, and you have a tableau in the end, and it's great.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about heaviness in games, theme goes a long way to selling mechanics. I think that's a great example. I'm going to mention another one that isn't one of those games, but Anachrony is a game that's so heavy, but it has a theme, at least like for me, that works really well as far as like this idea of time travel and like sending the resources back. And a lot of the heaviness of that game, if you're familiar with the theme, and like how time travel works, a lot of it just makes sense. And I think that's the same kind of thing. Like that idea of translating, you don't have to tell me necessarily, oh, this is in whatever language. You can look at the translators, you see names of languages on them. It's almost self-explanatory how those things interact with each other. Where I think Wayfarers and other games like that it's not so easy to figure out what you're trying to do. Scholars like flat out tells you, like you said, you're translating. Wayfarers is like, hey, you've got 10 different things you can do. And try to do a little bit of all of them if you can.
Yeah, and some of them even we noted that some of them fall into the category of like kind of dismissing the theme and saying these are tiles that you collect. Like it's kind of like breaking the fourth wall that, oh yeah, and this is a game, so you collect these tiles and you can score points from the tiles.
Yeah.
I don't remember, there's probably a name that they gave those tiles, but the iconography and everything just looks like take
Tiles.
a tile.
You're right.
So it made it a little, for me, felt a little bit heavier. Jeremy, based on what he was saying about Anachrony, what's your position on sort of theme and how it helps, and even the teach of a game?
Well, I just feel like any game where there's a lot of icons is where the people determine weight. They can see a bunch of icons. Like I show my wife a board, and I'll be like, "Oh, baby, look at this this game. I'm going to teach you how to play it." And she's like, "There's so many things on that board that I can't even describe, or so many places that give different things."
Yeah.
But I often find myself getting into conversations with random people in my group, and they'll be like, "Oh, this is light. Like I could show this to anybody." And I'm like, "No, you can't." Like most people cannot. Like most people who see a game that don't know games, that don't play games like we do, if you give them more than 3 rules to follow, like 3 essential rules to follow, that could be a tough sell. So, for example, like the game Bites. So Bites to us is like, it's light work. The concept is light work. But if I throw cards that are beyond the easy cards out there, that takes a lot of people out of the equation. There's too many things to think about. Even if they know games, there's like, what's the concept of like kind of waiting until the end? Most people are used to bopping it, and most people are used to chucking dice and letting the results happen. Or I put this there and I know I'm going to get that every time. But if I say timing, and if you're watching out for other people, then you can do this, and set collection and all that stuff, the blend of mechanics, even if they're light, sometimes that really confuses people. So whenever I think of weight, I always think of the amount of choices that you have on your turn and the amount of actual icons that are in the game. It's just the more you add, the more complexity visually people see. Now that changes. That changes when a game, I think people's opinion changes on a game being lighter or heavier, when after the upfront part ends, and now people can do things in a round easily, because they'll go like, okay, now I have a tableau of cards. That just means I get this, 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 and this. So then as the game goes along, they're getting all this, and this, and this. It feels easy. Now it feels easy. So there you go. That's kind of like my overarching thing of weight.
Yeah, it's funny that you boiled it down. When you started talking there, you said something with a lot of icons, and it made me think, I have a couple other benchmarks that happen during a game where when it happens, I'm like, this is a slightly heavier game. When any of us are playing a game and someone, after a decent teach, no matter who taught it, it was a good teach, someone goes, where is it that I get gold again?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
You know, that implies that, first of all, gold is probably not the only resource. And also there are a wide array of places to go in order to get things. And sometimes, even after the teacher, I've been in this position where I'm like, well, you can get it here, kind of, and also sometimes over here, but there's no real natural way of like, okay, here's where you go get gold. And I think that's something. I've never played a light game where I had to answer that question.
Right, I think that's...
Well, oh, go ahead. I was going to say, think of it like this. In some games, now, point of reference, too. Like, in some games, gold is just the resource. Gold, 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 gold. And then you play a game where the gold is the most restricted resource in the game, and you got to convert 2 things to get a 1 piece of gold, in this game. So sometimes just the concept of what the material is, it makes it harder. Or like diamonds in one game could be the resource you pay for everything, whereas there's 1 place you can get a diamond or 2 places in the game. You're like, how do I get that again? So that's weight as well.
Yeah, that's
reference.
It's kind of what I was thinking along those same lines when it comes to like what I would consider heavy versus medium. I would say medium to light games, it's go here to collect the thing and then go here to turn the thing in for points. And I think you get complex games where it's like, go here to get this one thing, go here to get this other thing, go here to combine those things into this third thing, then take that third thing over to this other spot. Now you're getting points. And those games can be way more difficult. Because you're not exactly seeing, so how do I actually score points? So your question of, how do I get gold? I think my question is, so how do I actually score points? Like, it might not become obvious. And I think some of those complicated games, there's games like Crystal Palace, for example, where you're getting the inventors and the inventions. That's a very heavy game, and it's not necessarily obvious at first how you're even scoring points in that game until you get maybe through your first play. And I would say that to me lends to the heaviness of a game. If I can't just flat out see like, okay, my points are coming from these 3 places, maybe they're coming from 6 different places, but they're only coming from this place, if they're also coming from that place, and like, you know, Shem's games do that a lot, where there's a lot of overlap to the way you're getting points. I know Paladins was like that, Scholars and Wayfarers are like that.
And it's interesting too, because you were saying Scholars is heavier because it has these many options you can do on your turn, right? There's a lot of like dice manipulation and which way you can take your turn to maximize it. But I also think, for me, heavier games are also when the decision space is more limited, right? Where there's only a few things you can do, so you really have to maximize how you're doing that. To Ryan's point, in the like, I need A and then B to combine to C before I can do D. So you're like really having to plan ahead like 5 moves to make sure that you did it right. Otherwise, you get punished heavily.
That's Lacerda.
And
that's
exactly.
Lacerda right there.
Planning ahead, I would have to agree, that is heavy for me, because that's where I generally fail. That's a lot to... I look ahead a little bit, but when you have to look really far ahead to kind of consider,
Kanban.
Okay, the things I'm doing here aren't really giving me anything back right now, but they will later. Plus, that also kind of goes hand in hand with my taste in games, too. I like getting that immediate feedback, so that also kind of plays a role in whether or not I play heavy games.
Well, I'll never forget our first play of Feast for Odin with Gary. That's a game where you can just be spinning these gears and doing stuff and feeling like you're really doing a lot and end up with negative points because you didn't actually do anything that scored you points. And like Feast for Odin, there's so many actions. Like
73, I think.
Yeah, that's
in the base game.
That's a combination of just like a ton of icons, a ton of options, complete freedom to do whatever you want. But if you're not playing that entire game to a point of getting points, then like you can just end up with literally negative points at the end, which I've seen happen.
You know, I also want to point out, this is all, of course, subjective. We're not the purveyors of like, this one's heavy, this one's light. It's different for different people. And I say that because I actually taught Mille Fiore to my sister over the holidays. But it was me, Alicia, and my sister. And I remember telling them, this is a very light game. Alicia hadn't played it. My sister certainly hadn't played it. I said it was light. I got about 3/4 of the way through the teach. And we would all agree it's a lighter game.
I would.
My sister looked at me and she's like, this isn't light.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
She's like, this is so much like, I don't know what you said, how this scored anymore. And it's just because she's not a gamer, you know, she's not an enthusiast gamer. So for her, that was just like huge. Like she was like, I'm not following this. This is, you know, she can play a very simple, straightforward game, but you know.
Well, it's Jeremy's point about the iconography, right? There's a lot of different icons there, which to us we're like, but they follow a pattern and we can like intuit what they might mean. But she's like, I have no idea what any of this is. There's a ton of them.
It's a lot. It's overwhelming looking for sure.
Well, think about it like this: like a game like Parks seems like a very light game, or Dog's Life. I think it's called A Dog's Life. You're just going down the track and picking something up where you're at. Okay, well, you can go down the track and you can't share a space, but you can share a space if you use this canteen. You flip the canteen over, and then if you go to the spot, you can flip it back over or take a picture, and then the pictures are worth points, but somebody can take the picture from you. But then if you're first there, you can go ahead and pick one of the cards, or you can reserve it. Why would you reserve it? So nobody else can buy it. Then when you get the resource, like, people think that that's so easy to understand, and they will be all in because all the pieces are so beautiful. But the thing is you will lose them just as much because of the barrier of rules. I go to a game cafe, and this game cafe, we go there and whatever, and he's like, he said some people, they see a box, you know, they see Wingspan and they go, oh, Wingspan, you know, beautiful, whatever. He said, you know, what's interesting is he said some families love it and they play it wrong. And then other family, you know, when he introduces it to a lot of people, they don't realize how many rules there are to the cards and the flow of the game. And I think the beauty of games are kind of deceptive. But I was going to say asymmetry is a thing. You know, it's another thing that's very attractive, but it's also a thing that's, I think it makes a game medium weight just as a whole. Like, there's very few gamers who even want to table asymmetry because it goes back to Ryan's point. how do I score? Oh, well, you score on your own. You actually don't even play with us, basically. Like, you don't even score points. You just do a program on your own. Like Root. It's like, no, you don't actually do that like we do at all. You mess up, you make a program, and then if you mess up your program, that's your fault, and you start over. How does that sound? And I think that's a very, very interesting thing. Asymmetry, very attractive, but also at the same time. And it starts at a medium weight, and it cuts people off quite a bit.
Yeah, I agree. I love Villainous. And I always think to myself that it seems like a really easy game because I'm like, it's not that complicated mechanics. But that asymmetry, I think, to Jeremy's point, it does do that. Where like as soon as I teach it to someone, they're like, well, what does my deck do? And I'm like, okay, well, your deck does this, and I'm gonna have to explain the whole character to you, and then your deck does this, and does the whole thing.
Open your pamphlet. Open your pamphlet and look at how you win the game.
Exactly.
It's like what?
Root has that same issue too.
Oh, Root definitely has. Even for enthusiast gamers, Root has that issue.
And I think that's a good thing worth mentioning too, is like the way that people find heaviness in games, because Root is not a hard game. Root's pretty simple actually, but because you need to not only know your rules but everybody else's rules. So like I was gonna mention to you, like Oathsworn. I think people would consider Oathsworn a very heavy game, just with the sheer amount of rules that go into it, and yet it's really not that complicated of a game compared to something like City of Big Shoulders, which doesn't have a very long rule book, but it's like one of the brain-burniest games.
Yeah, Oathsworn's not about like mastering it. Oathsworn is about knowing it.
Sure.
Like it's just a lot of systems to know. So there is, and I think it's fair to say that that's also weighty, is having to know all of these things to play a game. I think that probably factors into weight too. I do have a little game for us to play as we finish our conversation on weight. Some of our favorite games, I think, when we talk about, like you said, asymmetry and adding mechanics, all of our favorite mechanics, when you add them all together, they just get heavier and heavier.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
So I have some games here, some of our favorites, some not so much. But I'm going to say the game, and then I'm going to have the three of you guess the weight and see who's the closest. And you at home can guess along in the comments.
All right.
So I'm going to start, and these are in no particular order, by the way. I'm going to start with Brass Birmingham, which, by the way, I think it just got up into the second spot in the BGG Top 100. Yeah. So a very popular game. And it is a heavier game. So have you played Brass?
I have not played Brass, so I'm going to guess last.
She can guess last. I've played it once. Jeremy, you want to start? What do you think the weight, according to BGG, is of Brass Birmingham?
3.75.
Oh, dang it. Can I guess that?
Are we going to do Price is Right rules? You can't
3.74. No. I was actually thinking between 3.5 and 3.75 myself, I think is where it rests.
I'm going to go 3.78.
So what's your exact?
I think it's
you can't give a range.
Between 1 and 5.
BGG only does 0.5s, right? They don't, or like point to the second decimal, right?
No. They do the hundredths.
Hundredths, yeah.
So I'll say like 3.65.
Okay, you're both a little light.
Really?
3.9.
3.9 it is.
Oh, really?
Woo!
Yeah,
Never played.
That is a little heavier than I thought it would be rated.
I gave Emily, since she hadn't played, a little bit of a hint there, but 3.9.
You know what? I should have gave up, Ryan, because I was going to say 3.88. I should have just gave it up. Just gave it up.
Next up, and we won't belabor these too long, but the next one is Gaia Project, which I think many would regard as maybe a medium to heavy game.
Yeah.
But I would say, according to the weight of BGG, it's probably a heavier game. Again, have you played this?
I have not played Gaia.
Oh, I picked games Emily haven't played.
I got a good guess. I got a good guess. I haven't even played it. I'm going to get a good guess. I'm going to be very close.
What's your guess, Jeremy?
4.19.
4.19.
4.19.
I'm going to guess 4.0.
I'm going to guess 4.12.
You're 4.19?
Yeah.
Jeremy's closest, but it's 4.39.
What?
That's what I'm saying. I know it's that
does feel
I know
high.
people that won't even try to understand the concept of Gaia Project. Like, not even close.
That's true.
I got to tell you, though, I've played it, and I don't find it to be ridiculously heavy game. It's very crunchy.
So without the game being it's crunchy, I think the strategy of the game is what makes the game weighty. So that's another thing. You got icons, you got asymmetry, you got iconography, but there's also like to win against 3 other people is quite heavy on strategy, you know, and it's like, holy cow, like, yeah, the game's simple, but
that's a good point.
So that's
I think the more competitive a game is, it lends to the heaviness too a little bit once it's at a certain way. Okay, next one.
Right now.
Jeremy, this one's for you, so we'll let you go last on this one, okay? I'm going to start with Emily. Mage Knight.
Mage Knight.
You've heard about it. I know you haven't played it,
have.
but Jeremy's talked about it at least 100 times on Chit Chat.
My guess is 4.33.
4.1.
4.1, 4.33.
429.
Emily is scarily close. 4.34.
Woo!
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
For how much Jeremy
makes
says
sense.
goes into it, yeah.
There's a lot.
So
Yeah.
here's an interesting conversation point, though. Lighter than Gaia Project. And there's a lot to know in Mage Knight. It's a beast of a game.
Well, again, what I said, 2 different types of
Mage
learning,
Knight brings in that Oathsworn concept because there's
But the weight of your choices throughout that game, throughout the game, and then like the last round of game, like the last part of the game, there's so much time you could have spent just looking at your cards and not making a choice yet. Like, yeah, it's around that. I would assume, and it's a totally different game, which is very interesting, right?
All right, I've got 2 more. The next one is the one that I've never played, and I'll tell you right now, I don't have any interest in playing it. It is Food Chain Magnate.
Okay.
Food Chain Magnate is a splatter game, and these are all heavy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all.
And they all look white and like black. There's no color to them.
There's
no
a little bit of color.
I know there's obviously some theme, but anyway, what do you think the weight is of Food Chain Magnate? We'll start with Ryan this time.
4.8.
4.8?
I mean, I think it's probably one of the heaviest games I've ever played in my life.
That is wicked high, as they might say.
Well, maybe
in
it is,
Boston.
but
I've never played it, but I've heard it's very difficult. I would give it a 4.5 though, because not many games go above 4.5 on BGG.
4.5, 4.8.
that's true.
Jeremy?
3.8.
3.8. Well, I haven't done the math. I don't know who's closest, but it's 4.21.
Oh, that's lighter than I thought it was going to be.
It is a lot lighter. It's lighter. It's listed lighter than Gaia Project, which seems crazy to me.
Food Chain Magnate is like, Gaia Project is tough. You can get yourself into a bad position, but you can crawl out of it. Food Chain Magnate, you cannot. Like,
I've heard it's real
talk
tough.
about planning in that game. You make a little minor mistake early, and you're paying for it for the whole rest of the game.
Woof.
It's punishing.
It won't ever be punishing to me because I won't play it. Okay, the last one. This one is near to my heart, and it's on my mind because we recently got Cusco in, and we're going to play it, and it is a reimplementation of a classic Feld called Bora Bora. And Bora Bora, I think, up until recently, was probably considered, at least I considered it, one of Feld's heavier games.
It is also the most boring game.
Oh, I don't know. I think I disagree with that. I really like Bora Bora.
It's such a snooze. Oh, God.
I'll say I do like the new theme for Cusco a lot better. Not that we're really discussing that. Maybe
I'll give it a shot, though, because I was a different gamer back then. Completely different gamer back then.
Yeah.
But Felds, I'm either like, or, and mostly, So we'll see.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, on that note, let's start with you. How heavy do you think Bora Bora is?
But I'm going to say 3-4. I'm going to go with 3-4.
3-4?
It's not a light game at all. I can tell you that. It's definitely not a light game.
3-6.
3-4, 3-6?
I go 3.8.
3-8. Well, Emily's closest. It's 3.74.
Oh.
Okay.
Which is the lightest of the ones we've talked about tonight. But still, when we
that's
talk
not a
about
light
weight,
game.
3.5 and up is still a pretty heavy game.
Yeah.
You said that it used to be, you think, the heaviest Feld? You think Marrakesh is heavier or some
That's
of the
what
new
was.
ones?
That was
I think
I don't know about that.
I think I thought Marrakesh might be heavier, but when I think about Bora Bora, when I've gone back to try to like relate it to Cusco before we play Cusco, Bora Bora is pretty heavy.
I mean, Bora Bora is one of the ones I kind of like what I mentioned earlier, where it's very difficult to see how you get into your point.
There's a lot of different things going on.
You can do a little bit of everything and then score nothing. So
I also think we didn't mention this, but I also think the teach is important.
Yes.
Because if someone's a really good teacher, it doesn't feel like you're missing anything.
Yeah.
And you don't have, like, if you ask him a question like the goal thing, he'll be like, no, you get it here and you get it here.
Yeah.
But if someone like goes back to the rule book and goes back to the rule book, you're like, oh man, I may have to ask how we do that again, you know? And I think that's really interesting. It's funny we're having this conversation about weight, because when we get into games we played, we learned a heavy game out of a rule book. Like, we literally read through the rule book and learned the game. Ended up being like a 4 hour game. So it does. The teach matters. The teach matters quite a bit.
I absolutely agree. I take a lot of time and effort when I've got a heavier, medium, or heavy game.
Yeah.
And when I want to teach it to, say, Alicia or other friends who aren't like significant gamers, I really want to sort of like, I usually jump out from 30,000 feet and try to like give them a general sense of what's going on and how those things relate to the mechanics. And then hopefully that kind of comes together so that they can know. And yeah, you're right. Yeah. You've got to have answers to the questions. If someone asks you a question, how do I do this again? You got to be able to answer that pretty quickly.
Well, I think
you shouldn't be stumped if you're going to say the game's easy, right?
Yeah,
you shouldn't be stumped at the game. Yeah, right.
Not only just being a good teacher, but also like having a good group of people that are willing to help out. I think if you are playing with people, like, we're pretty blessed, I guess, in that we have some people in our gaming group, like Ryan and Artie, who, when it comes to a heavy game, it's not uncommon for us all literally to put our heads together. If you're like, guys, I don't understand how to get a gold. Well, let's all look at the board and see, oh, you could do this. And like, by the time we're done talking, you might feel like you have 2 or 3 options to get done. Now, some competitive players won't do that. And some people's tables, they just don't want that. But I like being at a table that does that. Because it's like, I've played this game like 5 or 6 times. And I know for you sometimes we've pointed that out where it's like, if you did it this way instead, you'd get the gold you wanted and also this other thing. And it's like, oh, I didn't even see that. Because some heavy games, you have to give a little bit of grace to players that are like jumping into this heavy game like Lacerda, and you could just realize that like you could make the experience lighter for them or easier for them by actively expecting them to ask questions.
All right,
David, I forgot to bring up one thing, and I want to say this one time about weight. This is another one: the number of turns. So like if you play a game and they go like you're going to have 12 turns or you're going to have 16 turns, the pressure alone is like Takenu, is like a medium weight game, but somebody would say that's too heavy for me when I tell you have 16 turns to accomplish this. Oh, and you can't score like you're going to score like 200-300 points, and you're like, how am I going to score 230? You know, and it's like, oh, don't worry, you'll find the combos in there, and you're just thinking to yourself like, as certain people, they'll be like, this is a major cutoff for me. I can't keep up, you know.
That's interesting.
I just thought about that, the number of turns.
I actually think outlining the number of turns when I've taught games has oftentimes helped people have an overall sense of, oh, okay. Because I think when someone sits down, if I'm understanding you correctly, when I say you have 12 turns, people get a sense, instead of sitting down and going, when does this end? How do I know what's happening? They go, okay, I've taken 1 turn, so now I know I have 11 more turns left. You don't.
So if I told you you had 12 turns in Merchants of the Dark Road to get all this done and score points, and you see 100 token, and you don't understand the flow of the game completely, and you're watching people trigger things left and right, sometimes people don't get that right away. They don't get the the double bonus and like how this triggers off of this. They don't know how to build an engine. So that's a concept as well. Like they may not understand a certain mechanic as well as you do as well. So it's that especially like route building, how to build a tableau, all that stuff, and you're like, and I got to do this in X amount of turns. Yeah. Just the rules alone are blowing my mind, you know. So that's kind of it's like a ticking time bomb, right? This pressure, and you can try to warn people all you want, but they kind of go, oh my God, that's too much pressure. I just thought about that number of turns as a thing.
I won't forget ever you teaching me woodcraft, and as you're going through the game and the mechanics, I'm like, okay. I got a pretty good feel for this game. I think I know how I'm going to approach this. And you're like, and then you get like, there's only 10 turns. And then I was like, and then we played 1 round. You're like, that's it? Like 9 more turns to go. And I was like, I thought I had that game until that moment. And then I realized, oh my gosh, like
Yeah.
now we're a tenth of the way through this game.
Think
and I've
about
done
all
nothing.
those
Like,
engine games. Think about all those engine games where you have 3 workers or 2 workers.
Yeah.
And it's like you do the first round and you're like, wait, that's it? That's the round? And I have 5 rounds? Are you kidding me? You know, like Starship Captains is over before it even starts.
Well, that's
it's
true.
Like,
that is true.
are you kidding me? How am I supposed to get all these points and do stuff?
You know,
Like,
speaking of Starship Captains, that is one of the games some of us have been playing recently. So since we've gone on and on about heavy games, let's each talk about one game that we've been playing. And one game only, Jeremy.
Well,
what have you been playing, Ryan?
actually, I do want to talk about Starship Captains because I've been thinking about that game a lot more than I thought I was. I was talking with some people on Instagram about it as well. It's a really interesting game because, like Jeremy just said, the game is over before you feel like it even starts. But once you get something rolling, you're like, this game is 4 rounds and it's done. And I felt that way after we played it. I was like, we barely got to do anything. It really needed another round. Then we played it again. And I was like, okay, well, we did so much more the second game.
We did.
Because that's a game where you kind of like figure out how to extend your turns. And I was talking to some people on Instagram about this too. And it's like, okay, I can see you getting to a point, kind of like in games like Blood Rage, where you have to stretch your turn out, where you have to learn how to manage, or Everdell. Like the first time I played Everdell, I did like 2 actions and I was done. And that was my, round. And in Starship Captains, like you can really stretch it out and you could find yourself the only one at the table left, still doing a bunch of stuff because the way you used your guys. And I think like I actually want to play that again and just kind of see how many more actions can I do? How far can I push that game?
I still don't. I've played it one more time since we played it, and I question whether you'd feel as strongly that way because I played it with a friend who'd never played it, and as soon as the game ended and I said, and that's the end, he was like, what? Like, he's like, we barely just got going. And he's not an enthusiast gamer, so it was really interesting to hear him, that same thought resonate with him. I really enjoy the game. It is a lot of fun. It does a lot of fun things. But I almost feel like it should just be 5 rounds. Just give me another round so I can have 7 guys to do stuff with. Because those 4 rounds just feel so short.
And I know you said one game, so I'm not going to talk about this, but we just...
Feels like he is.
I want to promote. I'm doing a little promotion. Dave and I have still been playing Oathsworn. We just posted our mini review, our Look After 5, so please watch
progress, and we've actually played through Chapter 6 now.
Yeah.
So wish us luck. We're going to continue to play. Well, probably, I'm going to guess we'll play 2 more times this week.
Yeah, probably.
At least.
Jeremy,
what have you played recently?
Oh, can I talk about 3 games now? I mean, honestly, I want to be a one-upper here. Don't want to be a one-upper. Steal the show.
You can talk about half of the game.
Jeez. Okay. Wow. Okay. So I played Federation yesterday. A buddy of mine had ported it over. I'm surprised I hadn't ported it over. It was a game I saw at Essen, and the tables were full, but I was like, whoa, I don't even know what this game is. It's... Once people get their hands on it, they're going to love this game. It's got like this it's got a spin on worker placement where the way you place the worker, top or bottom, is going to trigger not only voting for how the game will score at the end, but also how you check off boxes on your tableau, but also how you contribute to the rows that score as well each round, and how you're contributing to like 3 different things about how you place your worker. And it's also got like little tracks on each corner of the board. It's a really beautiful, it's like very color vibrant game, so that might be a turn off for people with the space theme and whatnot. But generally all you're doing is just placing this worker one way or the other way, and then there's also like a check mark system. So if you place it with the check mark side, you get to put a check on your board, and then you take ships off your board and put them on there to trigger different spots again. But then you have a track on the side, which only allows you to do certain levels as you go along. It's got a lot going on. But once again, you get comfortable with it. About 2 rounds in the game, but there's only 6 rounds, I think 5 or 6 rounds. So by that time, you are like, whoa, I need to really catch up. But even like placing the worker, there's a voting element to it. Not only for will these score at the end of the game, but also what scores during the games. So like just by weight alone, you have that as well. So it's like, there's quite a bit to consider just by placing one worker.
Yeah.
And that's quite interesting. It's a very interesting game. I think Eagle Griffin is bringing it over and doing a deluxe version of it.
Yeah.
I ordered it, unlike Lacrimosa, where I sold it in the middle of playing it. I bought this game in the middle of playing it. I was like, they were like, oh, it's like $75. I was like, yeah, buying it right away. It's awesome, beautiful.
Tell me it's going to make it to you before you come visit us.
No.
Unfortunately, it's not. I think they're doing like a whole manufacturer, like a full manufacturer line, giving it the full, Eagle Griffin treatment, and I think it's coming out in the summer or something like that.
Yeah, I actually saw Board Gaming Ramblings talked very highly about this last year. Was that an Essen release last year?
Yeah, it was. It was an Essen release.
Yeah, they really liked
folks,
it, and
be warned. Be warned. Yeah, be warned on that one.
I'm looking forward to that. It's thankful that Eagle Griffin's bringing it out. Emily, do you have a game that can be related to Star Trek? Because both of those can, kind of.
Oh, is that a Star Trek theme?
Well, it's called Federation.
That could mean a lot of different stuff. I didn't know if it was even space themed.
I know.
I've never seen it. Yeah. I haven't looked at it or anything.
I was just relating it to Star Trek, Ryan.
No space games for Emily. So no.
She's not a fan, right?
But it is a game that we also got early that I'm very excited that we got, which is Earth.
Oh yeah.
And I've already had a couple of plays.
Have you really?
Yeah, I actually have played this game before, and I love it, and I'm so excited, and now I'm obsessed because we have a final copy of it, and it looks so good, and the playmats look so good, and all of it is just so pretty, and I have pictures, and I'll put them up on the Discord, and I'm just so excited.
Emily likes Earth, y'all.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to playing that. I know that's going to be delivering.
I am too. Yeah.
Shortly. They do have a few
shortly.
copies, but it's all done, so it should be coming to. If you backed Earth, look forward to the next couple months.
Like very soon. Very soon.
In our Discord, have been really excited about it.
Yeah. What I've been not been playing, but played it a couple times. I played it with Alicia. I played it with Ryan, and that is Vienna. Unlike Cusco, which is a implementation of heavy Bora Bora, this is a re-implementation of La Isla, which is probably one of his, if not his lightest games, Feld's games.
Yeah.
And this is very different. We're going to have content up very soon, so I won't belabor the point, but it is a re-theme of that, and the theme itself is really cool. It's 1950s Vienna, and you're putting spies in buildings around Vienna, surrounding secret information to collect that information. And that information has different values, and the players are controlling the value of the secret information because that's tied to the scoring of points. There are now missions that you can go on and things that you can buy that give you ongoing abilities as well. But the whole game, just like La Isla, is built around multi-use cards because you get these cards, you play 3 of them. Depending on where you play them on your player board, they do a different thing. And they have, one of the coolest aspects is these powers that are on the bottoms of the cards. When you play it into the first spot, it comes down into one of 3 spots that you have for ongoing powers. Once those 3 spots are filled, every turn demands that you replace one of them with a new card.
Oh, wow.
So you can't get used to your ongoing powers. They're constantly cycling through, and guaranteed, the first time that happens, someone's going to go, I don't want to get rid of any of these powers, but you have to. And there are some that are repeated, so sometimes you can get lucky and go, I'll replace this one with one just like it. But it's a lot of fun. I really like what they added to it. It took La Isla, like I said, which was a light game, and I think it squarely, with all the things that it adds, puts it into the medium weight category.
Well, also, this is another contender for the way better theme. Like,
yeah.
I remember playing La Isla and being like, okay, this feels very abstract.
Yes.
Like some of the ways that things score. In Vienna, it actually doesn't. It doesn't feel as abstract. It feels
that's good.
Way more thematic. But also, that's one of the games, too, where the game felt so thematic. I remember, like, what are these cards called? And you're like, they're just
those are called cards.
It's just called cards. And I was like, all right, I thought there'd be some kind of...
That's true.
It's not too late.
You're putting the cards in desk drawers because your player board has desk drawers and all this stuff. And he goes, oh, what are the cards called? And I looked it up. It's cards.
Dude, that's another weight thing. Yesterday in Federation, we were playing the game, and they're like, put this in the so-and-so chamber with the voting smash and this and this. And we're like, could they stop with all these thematic names? It's driving me wild. Put the blue card with the red icon. Like, just say that instead of like, there's so many technical terms. You're just like, what do I put in what, please? And it's so funny. We keep talking about weight, and I'm thinking like of all these things that happened yesterday in our game.
So our chit chat talking about weight has become a very heavy episode. I don't know how long it's been, but we're going to wrap it up now. Those are the games we've been playing. Those are our thoughts on weight. Please share in the comments below what you think about weight or heavy games. And
what your favorite heavy games are.
Yeah, what is your favorite heavy game? You know what? Really quick. Favorite heavy game? 5, 4, 3, 2.
I don't know.
Okay.
Kanban.
I knew she was going to say Kanban. That's all I could think of.
Jeremy.
On Mars.
On Mars. Okay. I think I'm going to have to go, if heavy is the thing, I'm going to say Weather Machine because it's probably one of the heaviest games I've played.
Weather Machine is probably my favorite heavy game too. But I love heavy games
it's pretty
too.
heavy.
You know what? It's funny you asked that.
I was wrapping up.
I know, but immediately my brain is like, last thing I'll say, last point before we leave. Whenever somebody says your favorite heavy game, I feel like I need to justify
how heavy it is. Yeah.
And he's right here justifying why he didn't have an answer. Anyway, that's episode 114 of Chit Chat. As always, make sure everyone has fun at the table, and we'll see you next time.